Hi everyone, back again because you know me well enough at this point that it's hard to stop me talking once I get going. And while I stand meticulously by my top 15 albums being the absolute cream of the crop, there's been a bunch of records this year that I've simply not had the time to talk about. Being a part-time internet video making kind of guy means that priorities have to take place. And what with the moving house soon, as well as my full-time job keeping me endlessly busy, I only get so much time to listen to music, and crucially even less time to talk about it in these silly little videos that I'm so fond of making. Well, a few of these albums are on my official honourable mentions list. Some are absent due to simply not having been able to spend enough time with them yet. But rest assured that I have handpicked this best of the rest for a reason. These records are all fantastic. I've adored the time I've spent with all of these, and they will be presented to you in alphabetical artist order, as I don't feel there's any one true best out of the bunch here, especially given how wildly different some of these are to each other. We've got some prog, we've got some metal, some darkness, and some light, but what they all have in common is that they've all rocked my world. And I'm hoping that some of you walk away from this video inspired enough to check out all or some of these if you haven't heard them already. But enough of my fiddle faddle, let's get in there and talk about some music. It's no secret that prog rock and metal has been alive and well this year, featuring both newcomers and old veterans alike dishing out some of their best material in years. And I'm pleased to kick off this list with another record that subscribes to the classic modern progressive hard rock ideology. Now, I'd be hard-pressed to call this a metal album. It's almost more of a progressive alt-rock one in some ways, leaning heavily on melody and accessibility than anything genuinely esoteric or boundary pushing, but what Advent Horizon do bring to the table with this album is an immaculate level of polish, sheen, production and heart. This album sounds very full, it's a very clean record. I enjoy how direct it is, how easily digestible and immediate it is. There's not really any serious barriers to entry on this album, and as such it feels like a great icebreaker for introducing modern progressive rock to someone who's been on the outside looking in for a while. While I don't feel it's doing anything particularly new, A Cell to Call Home is pure entertainment. It understands how to make a modern progressive rock album, leaning perhaps a little too hard on typical tropes and expectations, but with how crisp it all sounds and how enjoyable the end experience is, it's hard to pin that kind of criticism against the band. A super fun record and definitely one to check out. While the previous album was much more rock than metal, the latest from Alkaloid is most assuredly on the Between the Buried Me side of the spectrum, featuring a lengthy, complex, intricate delve into the typical kind of sweeping sci-fi epic we've not seen since Parallax 2. Newman very much feels like it's following that kind of template, giving us plenty of musical showmanship, guttural growls, gruff cleans, and a sense of adventure among the stars about the whole narrative of the record. I had tried writing a full review of this album earlier in the year, but I simply didn't find myself with the time to do so. It is, after all, a beefy 70 minutes long, and certainly not an album that's easy to get into. Even after a good half dozen listens, there were still moments on the record that didn't immediately come back to me on repeated listens. But that's not to dunk on the record in any way, it's just that this is a dense piece of music that you won't really begin to appreciate until you've dedicated a significant chunk of time into its galaxy-spanning ambitions. But the time I have spent with Newman has been a very positive one. It's an immensely rewarding album, full of musical twists and turns. Unexpected moments and flourishes are peppered throughout the runtime, making each subsequent visit more interesting and engaging than the last. Perhaps with more time, I might have been even slotting this into my top 15. But for now, I simply had to highlight it to make sure that maybe someone else gets the chance to appreciate it even more than I have. Truly, hell has frozen over if I'm recommending an Avenged Sevenfold album to you in my year-end season. I've historically never been much of a fan of this band. They've never tickled my proverbial pickle, after all, always being one of those bands that were always just sort of, there for me, without ever releasing anything that I found particularly interesting or engaging. But then I started hearing talk about this one, rumours and whispers that it was eclectic as all hell and completely unlike anything they've ever done before, so I had to give it a curiosity spin, right? That curiosity turned into surprise, and that surprise turned into admiration, as Life Is But a Dream is certainly one of the more unusual releases from a mainstream metal band I've heard in recent years. I can understand the backlash to this one, especially from the band's established fanbase, given that this album flies in the face of everything you might have come to expect from the band. There's nothing accessible or mainstream going on here. This is the band unleashed from the shackles of expectation, and adopting a real, screw this, we're doing what we want to do kind of attitude. Yes, it's weird. No, it's not for everyone. But what they may have lost from their core base, Avenged Sevenfold have certainly picked up my own attention as true artists who have so many more ideas to them than I ever previously gave them credit for. And I sincerely hope that this isn't just a bump in the road on their musical highway, and we get even more of this kind of fearless creativity from them going forwards. This one was one of my smaller finds during this year, and honestly one of the ones I keep coming back to over and over, which is unusual for me given my usual blasé attitude towards purely instrumental music. There is a certain je ne sais quoi to this album, and I think it's ultimately how much this record is more than the sum of its parts. The individual moments on Breathing Space aren't particularly exciting, aren't particularly memorable or engaging, but by the time each song closes out, you start to realise that to truly appreciate this album you need to take a step back and admire the bigger picture. Breathing Space is one of those records that you need to immerse yourself in, to really drink deep of the vastness of the sounds on offer here. It has this mesmerising quality to make you forget about the span of time that's covered, to make you have that sudden moment of clarity partway through each song, where you take a look back over the path that's taken you there, and you start to realise the beauty of the journey. It's a deceptive album, never really feeling like much of anything in the immediate moment, but managing to feel so rewarding and expansive when taken as a whole. It's an album that demands isolation from the outside world, and sufficient time to allow the grand scheme of its patterns to take root within you. And believe me when I tell you that if you allow yourself to see the magic eye pattern that's hiding within its pages, then you'll be left with a profound sense of satisfaction by the time the record plays out.
I don't need someone to turn around. Maybe all you need are both feet.
There honestly aren't many things I listen to that I would thrust upon regular folk in my life. I'm certainly not the kind of person who hijacks the Spotify playlist at a party to play Green Carnation's Light of Day, Day of Darkness because tee-hee, you said one song each and mine's an hour long, tee-hee. This is where the Lemon Twigs come in, offering an extremely accessible, friendly, warming and personable sound that I genuinely believe could be enjoyed by just about anyone. It's got this charming, inoffensive, independent coffee shop vibe to it, and I mean that in the most affirming way. There's this sense of the great classics of the 60s about it, evocative of bands like the Beach Boys, with these marvellous vocal harmonies, softer sensibilities and beautiful crooning soundscapes that feel like the musical equivalent of sinking into a soft beanbag whilst enjoying a nice mug of hot chocolate. Everything Harmony is one of my most played albums of the year, simply because I enjoy breaking it out when I have friends over. It's a delightful slice of easily enjoyable, non-threatening music that has this wicked edge of complexity and nuance to it underneath the friendly and mainstream exterior. It's an album of pure delight, and one that I know I'll be revisiting for years to come. And because it's me, you know that for every nice, friendly and cheerful album I enjoy, you just know its antithesis is waiting just around the corner. And what could be stranger this year than Dan Briggs from Between the Buried and Me's little experimental album, In the Event of Emergency, released under the Nightmare Scenario name. Dan is one of my favourite musicians in the world, so it came as no surprise to me that this release ticked a great deal of my boxes. Now don't go into this expecting anything like Between the Buried and Me, Orbs or Trioscapes though. Nightmare Scenario is something else entirely and almost defies description. But I'm a wordy little ragamuffin, so I'll do my best. Imagine the musical equivalent of a sleep paralysis demon and you'll be getting the general gist of the record. That's not to say that there's not some beautiful melodies on offer here, and some incredibly polished compositions going on. It's just that it's all undercut by a general sense of unease and discomfort. Everything feels a teensy bit off, and it's very clear quite quickly that this is very much by design. In the Event of Emergency is not an album to introduce to your top 40 friends. This is weird with a capital W, blending parts of metal, free jazz, electronica reminiscent in places of Aphex Twin, but also with a backbone of Dan's comfort zone with his time in Between the Buried and Me. There's some incredible guest performances on vocals here from Abigail Kelly, Tommy Rogers, Kerry Toy and Becca Cole here, all helping to add an eerie and ethereal mood across the record. And while this certainly isn't an easy recommendation, I think this is one of those albums you need to try out at least once to see if it is in fact your cup of tea. Sometimes it does feel that music is seasonal. Much like certain fruits, certain music just hits better at certain times of the year, and solo black metal project Panopticon from Kentucky-based Austin Lunn has encapsulated this idea succinctly by crafting the most wintry of all winter music over the course of his career. But nothing has hit this nail on the head quite as effectively as his latest and arguably greatest output, The Rime of Memory. This record is mahoosive. Huge, patient and intimate, clocking in at 75 minutes long across 6 tracks, with a 20-minute epic and 2 of the songs breaking 15 minutes in length. This is an album that's quite content to take its time with its ideas. This kind of atmospheric, blackened post-metal is such a vibe for me and one of my most indulgent pleasures in music. I love how grand this album is, how overwhelming it is, and how unafraid Lunn is to make this record precisely what it needs to be. It's not until over 8 minutes into the 20-minute epic that the rug gets pulled out from underneath you. Up until this point, it's a haunting, beautiful, acoustic guitar-driven dirge with some of the most incredible compositions I've heard all year. But then, wow, what an immediate avalanche of salt to the ears that follows, with some of the most intense, savage barbarism I've heard from black metal this year. But it's this blending of delicate moments of a gentle snowfall that segues into an intense midnight blizzard that makes The Rime of Memory such an intense and unforgettable experience, and my personal frontrunner for Winter Album of the Year, if such a category was an oft-accepted one. I don't like power metal. I simply do not generally enjoy it. For me, I always consider it to be overproduced, one-track, one-note, tedious nonsense that doesn't fire up the happy brain chemicals for me. I generally hear one track from any power metal band, and frankly, that's enough for me. It's too cheesy, too in-your-face, and too much for me to be able to endure for more than a couple of tracks at a time, let alone a full hour-long album. So why the hell can't I get enough of Sacred Outcry's Towers of Gold? There's a secret source of ingredients going on with this album, something I can't quite put my finger on. There's nothing on here that's outside of the norm of power metal. It's bombastic to the point of being obnoxious. The vocals are balls in a vice falsetto. The guitars are intense, speed-driven and showboaty, and the entire energy of the record has this typical dragons incinerating armies whilst ancient wizards bend the fabric of reality in the background thing going on. On paper, I should hate this album. It just isn't for me at all. But damned if I can't stop listening to this one. It's got an infectiously addictive personality, and it's proved to me that great music exists in everything, when even one of my least favourite subgenres that isn't even doing anything wildly different to things I don't like within it, can still grip me, still entertain me, and still have me desperately reaching for the repeat button once the record closes out. Towers of Gold is an enigma to me. I've been fruitlessly trying to figure out what it is that it is doing for me that its contemporaries have been failing to do so. I just find myself grinning like an idiot and headbanging to the absolute absurd maximalism of it all. If you love power metal, this could be the album of the year for you. But if you're like me and generally don't enjoy it, maybe still give this one a go. It could pleasantly surprise you. Sometimes I like my metal straightforward. As much as I enjoy the fancy cocktail that is progressive metal, there are moments where I want my whiskey neat, my steak bloody, my cars loud, and my explosions big. Some Nuri are scratching that masculine basic itch for me better than anyone else has managed this year. Coming across as a kind of brutalist mastodon with all sense of pretentiousness abandoned in favour of cranking out face-melting, ass-kicking, cigar-smoking riffs, all in the name of heavy fucking metal. This band very much lets you know exactly what you can expect from them within moments of the opening track Death is the Beginning. And for 38 minutes, Somnuri keep on raising the stakes with each track, managing to go harder and heavier than the last. This is an album that encapsulates the idea of all killer and no filler. Nobody here has time for segue tracks, atmospheric interludes, or moments of calm amidst the chaos. This album is here to show up, break all your shit, piss on your carpet, flip you off and set fire to your couch before riding off into the sunset on a noisy classic Harley. It's a brutal, intense, no-nonsense album that's been living rent-free in my head for nearly half the year. If you want something that's just metal, without the pretense of thinking it's anything that's bigger or cleverer than that, then Desiderium is the record for you. It's short, sharp, addictive, and just pure entertainment from start to finish. It's been a good year for black metal, and arguably Wayfarer's latest album, American Gothic, is one of the cream of an already impressive crop. From the very opening bars, tinged with a classic bluegrass Americana, it's clear that this is not your typical Nordic-inspired blast of cold air. What Wayfarer have created here is a remarkable fusion of that classic country and western instrumentation grafted onto the intensity and brutalism of classic black metal to make something that's singularly unique in the subgenre and manages to make its tendrils felt outside of the core audience for this kind of music. I mean, sure, the usual tropes are still here. This is ultimately black metal after all, but it's how effectively the bluesy elements are woven into the core of its sound and identity. This is a record dripping in irony, in cynicism and dagger-tongued condemnation. It's brutal in more ways than its overall sound and music immediately convey. The old-timey western piano stings in closing track False Constellation, paired with the bluegrass distorted guitars, makes for an unforgettable experience. And American Gothic is one of the most intriguing, enjoyable and memorable black metal albums I've heard in years. Now, while I don't think it's likely to convert anybody to the genre, there's definitely enough going on here that it could certainly raise a quizzical eyebrow from outliers. And I would say if you're looking to have your expectations of the genre challenged, then American Gothic is absolutely unmissable. So there we have it. 10 more albums that I feel deserve to be talked about. If time had been on my side, I'd have loved to give these all full reviews, as Lord knows they all deserve that kind of attention. But alas, I'm one man with one brain and my fingers can only type a script so fast. But I couldn't let the sun set on 2023 without giving these records at least a little bit of attention, and I sincerely hope that you'll check out at least a few of these albums. They're all worth a listen, and some are definitely worth owning in physical format. There are, of course, plenty more albums I could have thrown on here as well. Finterforst's Gensites, Squeaky Feet's Cause for Alarm, DGM's Life, Malocarpatan's Vertumnus Caesar, Angra's Cycles of Pain, Ramage Inc.'s Humanity Has Failed, Soul Giant's New Wave, the Salt Pale Collective's A Body That Could Pass Through Stones and Trees, Osaka Punch's Mixed Ape. The list just keeps on going. But alas, I will never get to everything. But rest assured there's still so much music this year that I've loved, and perhaps I'll get around to talking about it at some point. But for now, I really do hope you enjoy the above selection. If you did like this video, please do share it around with anyone else you would think would possibly enjoy it, and please do consider subscribing to the channel for more content. I'll be leaving my link tree down below, where you will find all of the various places to find me on social media, as well as a link to my Ko-fi page if you're feeling particularly generous and want to help support the growth of the channel. Until next time guys, as always, Keep your rhyme signatures extremely odd.